Welcome to Sam's Business Growth Show. I'm Sam Dunning, a digital marketing, sales and business growth evangelist. Tune in and subscribe today as I'll be interviewing business leaders, experts and entrepreneurs from around the globe. You'll be learning their story, how digital marketing has helped them along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your own business. And welcome back to Sam's Business Growth Show. This is a very special episode today. I'm delighted and humbled to be joined by Alan Barratt. Alan is the founder and CEO at Grenade, the UK's largest supplement company and a globally recognised brand. After launching in 2010 with his wife Juliet with just £27 in the bank, Grenade was grown massively, and recently the majority share was sold for a huge 72 million to Lion Capital back in 2017, and since then Alan's continued to grow the brand with great force. Grenade's chocolate bar, Carb Killer, is actually the #1 highest selling chocolate bar in the UK at the moment. And Alan's core beliefs are building a brand of humour, humility, and the ongoing pursuit of excellence. Alan, it's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing, man?
Hi, Sam. Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me. I've got to say, speaking of humour, I love the way we were just obviously chatting very briefly off air. And then I do this as well, where we're just sort of chatting normally. And then the minute the camera comes on, we're like performing monkeys and we start doing this.
Yeah, that's it.
Everything, the volume goes up, everything starts getting amplified, doesn't it then? I do it, we all do it. It's just funny to see someone else do it, because I know I do it.
Well, I've just had my morning coffee, Alan, so I think that's just kicked in as well. So that's helped me out.
Well, you know what? I haven't had it yet, but I'm close to having pre-work. Another call at 11, and I'm going to have some pre-workouts after, and I can feel the chess session coming on. Even though it's not International Chess Day, it's not Monday, it's Friday, but
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, but any day for chess day.
Excellent. Well, myself and the audience, Alan, are keen to learn from your good self. Now, I know you've hammered out your story in a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTube episodes recently, so I think we'll skip that for today and we'll get straight stuck into the juicy parts, really. So our audience are keen to really know two things from yourself, Alan. We want to know your top business growth tips and some of the marketing channels that have helped you get from where you started to where you are at today. So, it'd be really interesting to learn, because I know you've scaled up your company. I think it was from around 27 quid, wasn't it, to multi-millions where you are now. So it'd be interesting to learn some of the strategies that you've utilised to scale it to such a massive proportion where we are today.
I tell you, it's interesting you say that as well, because I don't really think of myself having done that until someone else says it, because I still feel very much I'm in it. And especially with everything that's going on now, it still feels like a startup. So I very often look around at work and there's there's sort of 60, 70 people in the office. And, I remember each and every one of them coming in. The bulk of that's been the last 2 or 3 years. But for the first couple of years, Jules and I didn't hire anyone at all. But our first half a dozen staff that we hired are all still with us. The core Grenade team, as we call them. And I very often have to look around and I just think, how did we get here? And again, to answer your questions and say potentially give you some tips. I mean, there's loads and loads of obvious ones. Along the lines of, hard work and all of this stuff. But I genuinely believe, and I get asked this a lot, and I genuinely believe it's a combination of sort of 20 things that we've done and then been consistent with it. Consistency is huge. And I see lots of people work hard, but they don't work hard for long enough. My family worked hard all their lives. I can't remember a time I didn't work hard. I've worked hard for 30 years. I've worked myself for 30 years and I still work hard. So I think I do believe in business. It's easier for me because I don't have kids.
Okay.
So that's a sacrifice that we consciously chose to make. I get the fact if you've got kids or a family, you've probably got other priorities. So pretty much if I'm awake, I can be working, which does make me kind of quite dangerous or quite boring, depending how you look at it. But we could sort of be quite selfish with it, really. And for the first 4 years at Grenade, Jules and I didn't take a day off. We didn't take a salary because we didn't really need to. And even now, if I go away overseas somewhere, I'll always go somewhere that's useful for the business. Whether it's sort of China or Australia or America, or wherever. A friend of mine's in the Seychelles at the minute. He was sending me pictures of our bars in the Seychelles yesterday. So we can't really avoid it. So I might as well go somewhere useful. And to me as well, this doesn't really feel like work. It doesn't really feel like a business. This is my passion. It's my baby. So I'm very fortunate to be able to get up every day and enjoy it. And I would urge any entrepreneur or any business, hopefully, if you don't feel that way about your business, then you're probably not in the right business. So 100%. That's a huge help. And then I've mentioned hard work and consistency, but I genuinely believe you have to have, whatever your business is, you've got to have an absolutely world-class product or service. There's so much stuff out there that, I would look at as a consumer and just go, who cares? I think it's fine having something if you want to be kind of cheap and cheerful and basic and price orientated. That's absolutely fine.
Sure.
I think it's fine if you want to do something that's kind of uber premium and appeals to a lot less people because of price or whatever. That's absolutely fine. Obviously, that danger zone, is really in the middle, where you end up potentially, I always say, if you're not meaningful to somebody, at some point you'll be meaningless to everybody. And by that, okay. I look at brands like Under Armour, that I look up to. And again, Under Armour took on Nike. And how did they take on Nike? And they didn't take on Nike by doing what Nike were good at, because it's suicide. When Virgin Cola took on Coke, they went into Coke head on. It was never going to work. You have to look at where the brand's potentially weakest. Compression was so small at the time that, Nike weren't interested and got caught sleeping. So Under Armour came in and made compression, a big thing. And again, we've done that with weight loss and pre-workouts, and then namely with Carb Killer with a functional chocolate bar. All the big chocolate bar manufacturers now have tried to do a protein bar. But actually them doing that and sort of, dare I say it, not doing it that well because they're still very high in sugar, just kind of amplifies us to look even better. So world-class product or service. You've got to surround yourself with brilliant people. That's the hardest thing bar none, and that is still a challenge. For every 100 people that we interview, 99 wouldn't be right. Whether it's cultural fit, the ability to do the job. We find that super hard. And when we get the right combination of people, and we've never had anyone that we've got no regretted leavers. I've never lost anybody I wanted to keep. But I think when you get that right combination of people, where I trust them, they trust me, we always say, we cut them in half, they bleed orange. That's such a powerful combination, because I'm pretty capable. I can do a lot, but I can't do the work of 70 people. And you've got to realize really early on what you're good at, what you're bad at, and certainly stick to what you enjoy and what you're good at. And that's where you're going to have the most strength. And for me, I've learned that I'm probably best conducting the orchestra. I can do a bit of everything, but I would say conduct the orchestra. Don't go running around trying to play all the instruments. Easier said than done when obviously it's a startup, because obviously at the start you have to play all the instruments, but that's tricky. We have to identify those initial early roles, and then for Grenade, aside from having a world-class brand, product or service, you've got to really focus on one thing that you can own. I believe a brand has to own something, and the reason we had one product with Grenade and with our fat loss product, with our thermodetonator, was because we really felt like we could own and be distinctive in weight loss. We didn't invent weight loss products, but I think we invented one that was really iconic and stood out and was protectable, and all the other stuff just looked the same. And brands are always extensions of their founders, and for me, I'm very kind of all or nothing. I'll either do something absolutely to my best ability at 100%, or I just won't bother. Because I can inherently be quite lazy, which always shocks people. But I could work 7 days straight as well. So it does come to that. I'm just at a very, very extreme. So I think people have to commit to it. And I just see too much, non-commitment, too much fear with people, with businesses and brands. They treat it like a 9-to-5 business. And they can kind of feel they can turn it on and turn it off if they want. And I just don't think you can do that. I think if you're in it, you're in it. I don't think you can sort of turn it up and down. And I think anyone that's self-employed would probably tell you the same, really. They'll feel like they're always at work, which can be a bad thing. But I could only really say how I
know that feeling exactly, Alan. So just before we move on, you've laid down some absolute golden nuggets there. So if we could just recap on a few of those, Alan, and just dive into a bit of detail on some of those. So I've just been taking notes whilst you've been going through those. So I know one of the first points you said was to have a world-class product. So doing a bit of research on yourself before the show, I know that I was reading some articles, and I know that in terms of the supplement side of things, like you said, you chose to go with the Carb Killer chocolate bar. I think that you were the first guys to do that, really, weren't you? Because before then, all supplements were really in kind of plastic tubs or tins and things like that. So you put your unique spin on it, and that sounds like that was one of the keys to its success, right? On being quite unique.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'd already built, and I think this comes back to my earlier point on owning something and being meaningful to someone. Founders of brands should always gravitate towards what they enjoy. You know, the founder of Formula One, Red Bull, love Formula One. What a surprise! He's got a Formula One racing team. So they'll always, again, Mike Ashley, for the football team. You know, you'd always gravitate towards that want to do. I like military stuff. I've always been interested in military. So I started making product for military, specifically special forces, because I'm not interested in football and conventional sports. And because all of our competitors at the time, they were interested in football and cricket and rugby, they made products and supplements for those people, which is absolutely fine. But I looked at it and everyone was doing it. Again, they all looked and sounded the same. And, you know, I've got friends in special forces at the time, I still have. And, you know, no disrespect to footballers. And, you know, I don't really I just don't really get the achievement of training probably a bit most days and running around the pitch for 90 minutes. And they're kind of considered elite athletes. I know there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of skill involved. So I'm not kind of bracing footballers, but I don't really get it, because I know at the time, you know, I got friends who were, you know, parachuting into the Middle East from 35,000 feet, being dropped in the wrong location, having to run 50 kilometers in, say, 12 hours, you know, so a double marathon 52 miles, so run a double marathon in 12 hours through severe terrain, carrying 100 plus pounds of gear, getting there, then having a 24-hour firefight, then being shot 3 or 4 times, then getting airlifted out. And you think, yeah, I'd take a game of cricket over that. You know, I mean, some of the stuff they do. So I thought, actually, I want to make product for people who are really elite in something. And again, there's loads of elite runners and things like that, but I just gravitate towards the military. So, and I think by really owning that, and again, it being quite undercover, quite covert for a few years, we really built a solid foundation. We learned a lot as well by working with some of these amazing individuals. And then we really started to own specialized sports nutrition. And then when, a bit like Under Armour with compression, when we own specialized sports nutrition, and you've got, you know, pretty hardcore military guys going, this stuff's amazing, you know, we live on this stuff. It gives you credibility to do other stuff. So then when the protein bar opportunity came along, we certainly didn't invent protein bars. You know, protein bars have been around for sort of 30 years, but we invented good protein bars without a shadow of a doubt. Because for 30 years, you know, me included, people would eat protein bars, and it was just like chewing a dog toy. And any time, and again, this was the, you might have heard this is kind of an old school sports nutrition saying, but people would say, well, it's got to be good for you because it doesn't taste very nice. And people still say that. And I'd be going, well, why can't it taste nice? So, you know, if we made a protein shake, you know, I want to make it taste like a McDonald's strawberry milkshake. I wouldn't want it to taste like cat sick.
Oh yeah, I know the amount of protein and stuff that I've taken, Alan, has just tastes absolutely horrible.
But this comes back to that initial point, again, of that attention to detail and why it's so important, because, you know, we spend years on new product development. We always have, and we still do. You know, we spent 4 years trademarking Grenade before we even launched it. And I think nowadays, just no one bothers. And I just don't get that, because it comes back to that, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it well. I don't know why, you know, I wouldn't set off in a race, a competitive race, knowing I couldn't win. I just wouldn't do it. If I thought, you know, I'd want the chance of winning. Otherwise, I just wouldn't set off. And you know, that's just me, but I do think a lot of entrepreneurs are probably that competitive. And then, you know, with those bars, all bars pretty much tasted appalling. And some of these protein bars were selling extremely well. And actually, I noticed something interesting online. You know, a couple of particular brands that were huge and still are, consumers would be eating them and absolutely raving about them. And I go, I'll try that. You know, that's got a 5-star review for taste. And I'd try one of the bars. And I'm like, are we eating the same thing? You know, I'd take a bar into Grenade HQ and 30 people couldn't eat one bar. And yet it's getting 5-star reviews on Amazon. I think there's something not right here. And I think people were kind of becoming sheep. and just reviewing it and giving stuff good reviews because other people were giving it good reviews. And I'm just one of those people, rightly or wrongly, they'll all speak my mind. And I was like, actually, I don't like that. So I spent 2 years making one that I wanted to eat. And no one was doing a low sugar chocolate covered protein bar. So that's what we developed because no one else was doing it. It took 2 years literally to the day. And everyone was against it. Our investors at the time were against it. They said, don't launch it. It won't sell. Protein bars don't sell. They're not a thing, blah, blah, blah. So I just did it anyway. And those first 50,000 bars we sold in 2 hours. And then for the next 3 years, we were pretty much out of stock.
So that brings up quite a good point, Alan. So you said the investors at the time were all saying, no, don't do it. So what still drove you? Because that's something that probably comes up with a lot of business owners, a lot of people's minds, where it's kind of like you've got all these people around you saying, no, don't do it. It's a terrible idea. But in your mind, you're like, I'm passionate about this. I've been working tirelessly for weeks, months, years for this. I'm going to do it.
I should give you a really clever answer saying something along the lines of the fact that I've got this absolute fervent belief and give you lots of scientific reasons, but the real reason is just don't like being told not to do stuff. So I've never liked being told what to do. But joking aside, I don't ever want to be where everyone else is. That's just me, and I can. That's remember that for the last 30 years, I don't want to be where everyone else is. If all my mates went out to play football, I didn't want to go and play football. I wanted to go and do something else. And I just always rather be kind of one of one rather than one of many. And with the protein bar situation, this is kind of an interesting one actually, because I believe in making business just as simple as possible. People massively overcomplicate this sort of stuff. And actually, I learned this from Richard Branson, the same, in the sense that he just really gets quite agitated when people overcomplicate things because he wants to be able to understand it and keep it simple. And I'm the same. The minute it starts getting complicated, the chance of execution, it just diminishes rapidly. And with this protein bar situation, like I said, I was watching brands that didn't taste very good with a kind of a chewy bar doing well. So straight away, but they were quite popular. So that actually I can improve on that. There's a better way of doing this. If people will eat that bar that doesn't taste very nice, I think I can sell a bar that does taste nice. So that told me everything I need to know. Where you get institutional investors versus entrepreneurs, institutional investors generally are super intelligent people and lots and lots of business qualifications, but have never actually gone out and done it. It's all theory. And I'd much rather, do the doing. And I said to one of the guys yesterday, too much thinking, not enough doing. As I said, stop learning, start earning. I said as well. So I'd rather learn by doing stuff than just kind of overthinking it. And that's really common as well with business nowadays. But with these particular bars, I just thought, if I make something I want to eat, I'm quite unique, but I can't be unique in the situation that, I know it tastes nice. No, it doesn't taste nice. So, I think we could be onto something there. The reason these investors were against it was because there was no data telling them that it was kind of a thing. It didn't really exist because no one had done it before. But for me, to look at an industry that no one's done before, that's the opportunity, because I don't want to be in an industry that everyone's done it before, because what's the point? A lot of these business models, once they've been used once, that model is broken once it's been used. So in business, everyone has to find their own way. And, we still are finding our own way. But that's why we always say, we do things our way and nobody else is. So now, we're very, very reliant on data. But I'll have a look at the data, and stuff like Amazon, for instance, is really useful in terms of saying what our top sellers are, because you've got 30 million people buying product. It's updated hourly, and at any point you can see what our top selling protein bar is. So,
got it.
That it's useful from that perspective. But if it came to me doing a new flavor, I'd just literally go on gut feeling, and that's what I did with making Carb Killer. Went on gut feeling. And other advisors are saying, look, this category doesn't exist. And they're thinking, therefore, what's the point? Because they'd rather go into a big category that did exist. For me, that's worse. It's more competitive, although neither are easy. You can either fight it out with lots of people in a competitive category, or you can build the category. They're both hard, but I'd rather build the category than kind of just turn up late to the party and, do what everyone else has done, because it's just not me. I'd rather just go and do something else. And we've always done stuff like that, really.
Makes sense. Okay, Alan, well, you've shared some great stuff with us so far. And before we jump into some finer details on how you scaled your business from a certain level to a higher level, what I want to touch on is sacrifice, because you've made a really good point. And some of the other entrepreneurs that we've had on the show so far have kind of homed in on this as well. So it's interesting that you said you've made quite a few big sacrifices to get to where you are now. Plus, you're working pretty much every day of the week non-stop. So is that something that you feel that to be an entrepreneur, to be a success in business, you have to do? You have to kind of put all your time and sweat into this. Otherwise, there's no real point in doing it half-heartedly.
To be honest, I do. I mean, if anyone can come along and build a huge business working 3 days a week, and just kind of not taking risk and not committing to it and not making sacrifice, I would love to meet them. But I would also say that they've probably had a lot of, I don't really believe in luck, because I believe that kind of luck is opportunity meeting preparedness. I always say, but I'd have said they've had a lot of tailwinds, let's say, because we certainly haven't got where we are with luck. We've invented categories that didn't exist. We set up post-recession or in a recession. So we trademarked Grenade. We actually started the formulation process and trademark in 2006. So from 2006 to 2010, the last economic crash, we worked all the way through that. Okay. So I had to be super cost conscious. And again, a lot of this stuff, that wasn't in supermarkets. So we had to convince the entire supermarkets, all those retailers, that this was a category and existed, very much like Red Bull did back in the day. But yeah, I can't think of a single entrepreneur that hasn't had significant risk. I mean, even, sorry to mention Richard Branson again, but only because he's documented this a lot in terms of working all over the world, not really having an office, sitting, whether it's Necker or on a houseboat or in, a student flat. Okay, he was very, very flexible about where he worked, but he was still working. And okay, he had his kids and his family around him, but he was still working. So yeah, he was there a lot when they were growing up, but he was still working, but he wasn't, going to an office 9 to 5. So I think that's probably one thing that this pandemic will teach us, is more people will work from home. More people will get what I would call a work-life blend, not really a work-life balance. Because I think balance means you're kind of doing one or the other. But I think the blend now meaning, I'm getting emails from my team at 10 o'clock Saturday night, regularly. If they want to sit there and do that, then that's absolutely fine by me. I don't mind when they do it, as long as it gets done well. And, if they want to do that and have Monday morning off, fine. So I'm generally quite laid back about that. And I think all that's probably changing. And certainly in the future, there probably won't be as many people driving to the office. Because one thing I don't miss is, a 2-hour-a-day commute. It's just not productive time for me. So I can make a certain amount of phone calls, but the phone network's fairly bad between Stratford and Solihull, so it drops out regularly. So it's difficult to make constructive phone calls. No,
that's it. I think you're bang on. I think the pandemic, one good thing that's come from it, we can say, is that remote working is going to be up, and like you say, people aren't going to be wasting as much time on traveling in their cars or on the train, whatever it may be, on the bus, because they realize they can jump on Zoom calls or they can work remotely. And I think employers are going to trust their staff to be able to work remotely, because they've seen, most people can anyway, can be trustworthy working from home. Before we get to that, I would like to touch on one point that I think would be of value to myself and the audience. So you mentioned, I know that you guys have recently got a massive contract with one of the major garages, haven't you? So all your bars are rolled out.
Oh, yeah, you're probably referring to Shell. Yeah, we supply all of them, but yeah, you'll be referring to we've got a global agreement with Shell. That's correct. I've forgotten about that. But yeah, we have. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that.
And also, you talked about kind of breaking into supermarkets, so getting your bars as a kind of mainstream product. So for anyone that's looking to do similar, doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to get their product into a supermarket, or they're just trying to get suppliers that can ship out their service or product. How did you go about doing that? How did you break into such a difficult tangent?
It's a huge amount of hand-to-hand combat, I would call it. And it's taken 10 years, and we still, with the retailers, aren't necessarily where we need to be, because it's changing all the time. So even with the retail distribution we've got, which is huge, so we've got 100,000 locations in the UK that sell our products. Traditionally, we've been at the back of store with sports, whereas so consumers have to go into the stores and, wander around the store to find us, get a bar and then leave. But we've been winning from the back of the store. So we've been outselling product that's at the front of store in the sexier locations, because they're closer to the till points. We've been beating many well-known brands, even though we've been at the back of the store. So we're at the back, chocolate's been at the front, and we've still been outselling it. So obviously what we wanted to do was bring our product to the front of the store. Even that's taken pretty much 2 years, because consumers are just not consumers, our retailers are generally quite slow to make decisions, only because they'll have like 1 or 2 range reviews a year, and they don't want to take risks. I completely get that. Where we've been fighting to come to the front of the store, then say the pandemic hit and front of store traffic is now down by 50% because people aren't running in on the lunch hour and doing a meal deal, which is why so now you must want to be at the back of the store again. So you can see why, just over the case of a couple of years, so actually what we really need now is to be at the front of the store and the back of the store. So that way you can kind of be everywhere, multi-sited.
And how did you win those contracts initially, Alan, just to jump in, to actually nail the contracts originally? Was that pitching, or was that kind of reaching out cold? Or
persistence. So remember, when we first got into a supermarket, it was with one product. It was with a product, thermo detonator that looks like a hand grenade. So it wasn't the easiest thing to get onto a supermarket shelf. What we did first was we dominated specialty. So specialty for us is, say, Holland and Barratt, GNC, privately owned gyms, privately owned supplement stores. So that was the path of least resistance for us, because it kind of makes more sense to go and buy a fat burner from Holland and Barratt than perhaps Tesco for lots of people. So remember, you've got to go back 10 years where sports nutrition was a very specialised industry. And I've already talked about the specialised product that we have. Now in 2020, it's not a specialised industry, and people want to be able to go to probably their supermarket and buy good quality multivitamins or a protein shake or a protein bar or a weight loss product. So they're not going to probably buy a complicated pre-workout or a complicated intra-workout, but funnily enough, they actually can. So we supply Tesco with 50 calibre and Defend, but you wouldn't stand a hope in hell's chance of getting that in 10 years ago, because it wouldn't have sold. And remember, these are generally expensive products, 40, 50, 60 pound products. It's not something you'd walk down a supermarket aisle and go, oh yeah, tomato ketchup, bread. I'll just spend £60 on a pre-workout I've never heard of. They're just not going to do it. So our product originally has always been something that's been sold with some assistance. So, they would go to a Nutricentre or a GNC, and they'd say, I'm thinking about losing weight, what do you recommend? And then, that store associate would recommend them. So what we did was dominate specialty first. That gave us a few thousand stores. We're always talking to Tesco, who wants to get more into health from an early day. So I managed to find out who the Tesco buyer details were. His name was Andrew Carpenter, I think, at the time. And I dropped him an email and he didn't respond. But I only ever sent him one email, because I don't believe in chasing people. And again, people, as much as you want to persevere, I also don't believe too much on pushing on doors that are very firmly closed. So I sent an email, and then what we did, we carried on doing what we were doing, but we just supplied all their competitors. So 6 months later, he actually replied to my original email and said, do you want to come in for a chat? And then I actually said, so I just said then, actually, why not, out of interest? And he just said, I can't ignore you any longer. But it was interesting that he couldn't ignore me.
At least he was up front.
In one email. Yeah, exactly. And do you know the best thing about it as well was it wasn't me badgering him. It was everyone else badgering him. So you got, say, for instance, if I wanted to try and get into a particular retail chain, then, and you'd send the buyer some product and you'd have a conversation with the buyer, but I'd also send it to everyone in the office, because then they're not going to believe anything I say or one of my team says, despite the fact we've got all the data, because you can make data saying it show anything that you want, but their co-workers or their kids, and this is a common one, buyers will say, oh, my kids love this stuff. If the buyer's kind of in their 40s and the kids are 16, 17, 18 or whatever, they go, God, my kids live on this. All their friends live on this. And they become influenced by that. This is actually one of the first generations where parents are more influenced by their children than children being influenced by their parents, which is unusual. So maybe that's just unique to us, but that's something that we've noticed, definitely. So,
awesome.
And then again, you see, this is why it comes down to you've got to have a good product. Because if the product doesn't taste good or it's not good, no one's going to recommend it. It's back to that point, keeping it simple. The amount of people that make protein bars that taste shite, it just beggars belief to me. Because I'll eat one of our bars, I try a competitor bar, and I go, why would anyone buy that bar ever again? And actually, that tends to hurt the industry. Because if someone buys a bad protein bar for the first bar they ever buy, they're never going to buy another one. If somebody buys one of our bars for the first time, they're probably going to buy all the others because they'll try more. So just comes back to that quality point, and again, having a world-class product. So we got into Tesco. I think it was about 2012. We got into Tesco, so after a couple of years. And again, not huge sales, but what you need with FMCG products and food products is you need tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of locations. And again, when you've got one, then you can start the conversation, in our case, with Sainsbury's or Asda or Morrison's. And again, they all need to have what they all have. So it kind of opens the floodgate then, but the first one is the hardest.
Got it. And that brings me on nicely to a point I really wanted to discuss with you, Alan, which was a lot of small business, I'm sure, on the same boat, where we're on kind of a few 100K a year turnover or revenue. How do you get from that stage, from doing a few 100K, perhaps close to $1 million, to breaking into the millions? What was the turning point for you? Was it being able to venture into all the main supermarkets? Was that what clicked it? What the light bulb moment? Or was it something else? Or was it hard work? Or was it getting the right team members? Or was it a marketing strategy? Or was it a mix?
I mean, it's kind of all of that. I mean, we didn't really have a marketing strategy as such. And, we do now, but it's not something that I spend time on. The team would do that. But I just like doing stuff that I enjoy as kind of like one-off individual challenges. I like driving tanks through London and things like that. Is it a strategy? Yeah. Not really, but it works. It's good fun.
Good for branding.
So I like doing that sort of stuff. In order of turnover and scale, I mean, we just had that real focus. So for the first 2 years, we only ever had one product. And we got that product up to 5 million revenue just with one product. So just through focus, really. There are, and that's a lot of sales for one product.
That's a heck of a lot of sales,
The reason we did that as well, again, was deliberate, because when I was a distributor for sports nutrition brands, most of the brands that we dealt with had huge product ranges, 95% of which didn't sell. And as a distributor, I didn't want stuff that was sat in my warehouse. A retailer doesn't want stuff just sat on their shelf. So when I was a distributor, I cherry-picked all the bits of brands that I wanted. And that's why, we consciously started with weight loss, because at some point, everyone's going to want to lose weight. And it just, that singularity of purpose, I think, really paid off. Because if I go in, I've got, product in a grenade bottle and say, right, this is the best-selling fat burner in the UK, which, it still is. But I've got all these other products as well. You're just diluting your own proposition. So I think you'd be really clear in what you're offering. And to be fair, the turnover just comes obviously, through sales. So it was never we never had strict financial targets. We kind of do now, because it's easier to make those kind of predictions. But I think our first year of business, we did about 250K, which is a partial year. Then I think, year 2 was like $1 million. Then year 3 was like 4 million. So we just kind of quadrupled it or doubled it, which is how we've managed to stay in fast track for 6 years running in the fast track 100.
Got it. Okay. And before we kind of wrap things up, Alan, it would be interesting to know, appreciate now you've got a marketing team that probably look after a lot of that with your good self overseeing it. But in the early days, I think you were doing shows, right? Were you doing trade shows to market? And then I guess you moved on to other channels. So could you talk us through kind of the early stage marketing, maybe cold outreach and shows, and then what you moved on to do, and then when you got a team to look after it for you?
Yeah, definitely. So, the marketing team was my wife.
Okay.
And so I did sort of sales and product, and then she did marketing and everything else. Although we both did, bits of social media and so on. But the early days, the trade show, it's not as big as it was now, but a good old trade show was a good way to kind of get in front of consumers. This was Facebook was out. This is 2010, so Facebook's out, but that's probably about it.
Sure.
And for us, it was Body Power, and we decided we did this Body Power show because how were we going to go and tell the industry about our grenade product? And actually, it was our 10th anniversary yesterday. It was 10 years to the day.
Oh, congrats.
that we stood at Body Power. So I put that on LinkedIn, the original picture. But we got no money, so how did we stand out when all of our competitors have got huge budgets and we're going to give away tens of thousands of t-shirts, and they've got Formula One cars on their stand and loads of fitness models and whatever. And I thought, well, we're called Grenade and I like tanks, so I just talked a friend of mine who owns tanks into lending us one of his tanks, and we drove a 17-ton armoured personnel and self-propelled gun into Body Power, put a grenade banner on it, got a couple of these grenade t-shirts, and sort of stood there with our grenade product, and then waited for something to happen. And then consumers loved it. And again, we made contacts, and there were people there from the US and, and that's where Holland and Barratt actually saw us for the first time, was at that show.
Awesome.
And I think, and one of the things that I think has been critically important to Grenade and still is, and it's the best weapon in any entrepreneur's arsenal, and certainly has helped us along the way, and certainly again at those first shows talking to people, and everyone's got it and it's free, is personality. It goes a long way. And people buy from people, and because we've always been so passionate about Grenade from day one, that's been infectious. And because we've believed, other people have believed, and it's just been that kind of slow snowball effect, really. The repeat purchase rate for thermo detonator was like 80%, which is huge. So I always say, selling something to someone once is probably relatively easy, but do it again and again and again and again. And people have consistently bought that product for 10 years because it's good and they trust it and they like it, and it's becoming iconic now. So with us standing there with that tank at the show, and I put this on LinkedIn yesterday, as I mentioned, and twice the number of people so far have seen my LinkedIn post. In fact, 3 times, because I think it had about 80,000 views as of this morning in 24 hours. There were only 20,000 people at that original show. So isn't it interesting how, 10 years later, I can reach 3 times the amount of people and not even leave my office versus going and standing there and doing that trade show. But, we absolutely put the hard yards in with all those trade shows, and we built the team and we took tanks into shows all over the world. That was our thing. And the nice thing about those trade shows as well, where, we started off with no sales, and then we'd leave and we'd have, a couple of customers who might have, spent £20,000 with us because they bought, thousands of our fat burner product. And we could quickly work out we paid for the show. So, we did a show in Germany, and by the time we'd even driven back to the UK, the show was free because we'd sold that much product. And I thought, this is great. There comes a point then where you start turning up at shows, which tends to be what's happened over the last few years. And we know everyone. There's a lot of market awareness. We're spending more than ever on the shows, but actually we're not getting the return. So now we just don't do shows pretty much, because you're just turning up and telling people what they already know. So
knowing when to stop then sounds like a good lesson learned right then, Alan.
Definitely. And it's really easy to get sucked into doing what everyone else is doing, or just doing the same thing because it used to work. And this stuff kind of starts to turn into vanity. And so we pretty much stopped the trade shows, because now, trade show for us might be like $100,000, and I could spend $100,000 elsewhere. We get more visitors to our website in a day than would even be at the show. So you're kind of better off spending our time and energy that way. But we do still like doing experiential stuff and sort of rocking up in London every now and again in the tank, because consumers love it and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great fun. So it sounds like even from the start, you've kind of gone for things that were quite unique in terms of representing the brand and standing out. And like you said, that had a huge impact at the first trade shows you started going to. You started getting decent orders and then grew it from there. Apart from reaching out to supermarkets and brands to start stocking your items, were there any other ways of marketing outreach that you did until you built up the team now? And obviously now you've got a multi-channel approach, I'm sure, with your website, online marketing and such to drive revenue.
So we're still learning a lot about the digital side of things, because that's not my specialty. I'm kind of an old school guy.
Sure.
I used to work in a shop, so I like product in shops. And ultimately for, edible food products that are £2, you need them in shops. So multi-channel's kind of harder for me personally, because it's not my forte. But there's lots of people in the business that, it is their forte, and having everything coexist. So people, going into coffee shops and buying bars leads them into going online onto, say, grenade.com or Amazon and buying boxes. So a bit like Coke, really. When you're thirsty, you don't go online. But if you buy, a can of Coke in a shop, you might buy a case of 12 at the supermarket, or, when you're on Amazon or whatever. Social media's been huge. I don't like a lot of the traditional social media style models of having kind of ambassadors and influencers and paying people to say stuff. And in fact, for the first 9 years of Grenade, we never paid anyone to say anything nice about us. People just did. We've had a period again now where you start, getting bigger campaigns and better known people have got bigger reach. But even now, we still only work with people that we really like. It's all completely genuine. These are all people who've approached us. We get approached daily by every major football team you can think of, every major rugby team. They all want free product. and we just don't do it. You know, they all use our product and they all buy it. So, and you know, I mean, we had one pop up yesterday from, you know, somewhere quite obscure. It was a Caribbean rugby team, and it's the same. You know, for them, they buy product. And again, to a certain extent, if you're a professional sports person, why wouldn't you? We make the best stuff, and it's informed sport. So if you don't want to buy it, you kind of got no choice anyway, because everyone else's product is either worse or not informed sport. So I think we've got the best combination there. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really.
Fantastic. Okay, no, that's great. We've covered some fantastic ground, Alan. One thing I do like to ask is that if anyone tuning in is thinking of starting their own business, or anyone has recently started a business, are there any quick tips that you could give them just to steer them on the right track, just to keep them motivated and kind of make
do you know what? I was chatting to I did another podcast yesterday actually, and we were saying the same thing about this, and I'm going to give the simplest advice I can ever give with this, because I very often entrepreneurs and people in business really underestimate the simplicity of this answer, but it's actually to start it in the first place, because the vast majority of people I know that talk about doing a business never even start it. All they do is talk about it, and talking doesn't get you anywhere. If you start it, you'll learn something. And I know it's like a really stupid analogy, but you'd be surprised how many people are analysing the race and why they didn't win the race, and then when they look back, they never actually started the race. So, you know, absolutely just do it.
Get started.
I mean, protect the downside. So, you know, if you're sort of 45 and have got 3 children and a massive mortgage and a well-paid job that's secure, maybe don't quit your job, you know, and kind of remortgage your house and risk everything. But maybe work at your job in the daytime, build a safety net up, and, you know, evenings and weekends and spare time, build the other business up, and then, you know, let one out and then go part-time and let one overtake the other. So, you know, be sensible about it, but at least do it. I kind of get quite frustrated with people asking for business advice, and 3 years later they're still asking for the same advice and I still haven't even started it. So we just kind of don't give it now, just because it just irritates the shit out of me.
Fair enough. Yeah, don't blame you.
I'll give you my favourite example of business advice story, just to wrap up, in the sense that, just because this is completely true, and I've got a guy that does sports massage with me that's an awesome lad, and I'm his longest serving client. So for once a week for the last 4 years, for an hour and a half on a Thursday night, he's come and give me sports massage. And he's brilliant at what he does, but also he's very upbeat. I like him. It's good downtime for me, and we just kind of chat shit, really. So but he gets more quality time with me than any of my senior team would of an hour and a half a week uninterrupted. So he can ask me anything he wants, you know. So he does. And he was setting up a business at the time, and he talked about it for 3 years. And again, with all the advice, helped him the name, helped him with trademarking, looked at logos with him, did all this stuff, and then. Again, it was just all talk and no action, to the point that I banned him from talking about it. I said, you know what? I'm not interested. Talk about anything you want. Never mention this business again, because you're not doing it, and I'm just getting pissed off with it. And he went, do you know what? You're right to say that. Fine. So we never spoke about it. I then did the Steve Bartlett show, the CEO, last year. And it was one of the first big podcasts I did. It was about an hour and a half. And it was one of the most downloaded podcasts ever in the UK. I think it reached 4th in the Apple iTunes overall chart. Wow. And he listened to this podcast, and he came in that night and he went, listen to your podcast today with Steve Bartlett. Unbelievable. The stuff you were saying. I went, Ben, I've been telling you that for 3 years to your face. And he went, different on the radio though.
Oh dear.
But isn't it bizarre how all of a sudden you can tell someone something to their face and it's kind of worthless because there's no one listening? The minute you're, you know, on the radio in inverted commas, all of a sudden
that's a good point.
It makes that, well, it must be true because I heard it. It's like it must be true. I saw it on the internet, or it must, you know, I saw it in the newspaper. But it just kind of almost, you know, gives it credibility. So whereas I suppose that, you know, the laughy, jokey bloke on a Thursday night that was actually saying all this stuff was just going in one and out the other. But it's just an interesting point. So I think, very long-winded way of answering your question. But yeah, fuck's sake, just do it. Do something, do anything.
So has he actually started his business yet?
I've got no idea. I don't ask him.
Bloody hell.
To be fair, no, he has. I did ask him about a month ago. I've not seen him obviously for 7 weeks, but I did. He was doing it, and he'd sold some. I even ordered one off him. I didn't even want it.
Oh, there you go.
But I even ordered one off him to basically. It was
just to hype him up a bit.
I've got a sauna, but I ordered another one just to kind of. I was like, you've got sales for this thing now to try, and he still didn't do it. But it was one of those things I've not really had time. It was like, well, you have had time. Did you train today? Yeah. Did you go to the supermarket? Yeah. Have you been to the gym? Yeah. Have you brushed your teeth? Yeah. You had time to do all that. Have you read a book? Yeah. But again, there was too much reading and too much research.
Too much procrastination by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, definitely, but it's really common. So I'm not knocking him because I love him to bits, and it's very, very common, that is, to be fair. And it's the fear factor. People are scared of failing. They don't think they're good enough. But you'll never know unless you try it. And I'd much rather do it and fail and go, do you know what? I tried that. Look back and go, well, actually, I didn't even bother. Because if you don't do it, you've already failed. So you might as well try it and fail than fail by not doing it. So it's kind of the same thing, really.
Absolutely spot on.
No problem. And again. Well, I was just going to say as well, and all these random nuggets of wall-to-wall wisdom, as I like to call it, or business brand and banter, it's all available on that. I've got a podcast called Pull the Pin. We've got the first 8 episodes are released as well, so it's on Spotify and iTunes and stuff. So If anybody wants to hear business brand and banter with me chatting with the Haskells and with the founder of Unilad and some of this stuff as well, there's some great gems in there. But we just generally laugh and take the piss, but there are some nuggets in there as well. So if people want to know more, they can go and look at Pull the Pin.
Great stuff, Alan. One final question is, have you got any daily habits, or are there any habits that you think that people should follow to be a success in business?
Yeah, good and bad ones. Yeah, I do actually. I suppose my, what else I have? I mean, I like routine in the sense that I'm a big believer in getting as much sleep as possible. I always train, I'm very consistent with training. I'm not anal about it. It's the point. It's like, it's very fluid. I don't feel like it one day I won't do it, but I'll do it the next day. So don't beat yourself if you don't do it. But I do like having kind of good habits and a good structure, and also nutrition. So I eat well. If I want junk, I eat it. Again, I don't beat myself up about it, but 90% of my diet will be really good food. So I think that eating, sleeping, training element for me is the basis of just feeling well, feeling motivated, recovering, having that mental clarity. So that's the type of stuff I do, because as I said before, I'm kind of always at work.
Sure.
And I've not done it for ages, but I quite like shooting as well. But also I like flying. I've got an aircraft, and I'm not doing it at the moment, obviously, because of the pandemic. But I do like kind of flying places, and that's kind of, it's not relaxing, but it means when I'm flying, I'm thinking about flying. I'm not thinking about work. But everyone should find something that is good for them, for their mental health, that they enjoy doing. That's a bit of, them time. I love running, but I can't run because I've got a bad back. So I'll tend to go out walking. I find it a bit boring. But yeah, just when it's walking, mountain biking, any of that, listening to podcasts, being inspired by others, surrounding yourself with brilliant people that inspire you. These are all just good habits that people should do in their day-to-day lives. And just, to be honest, just avoid negative people, and they're everywhere. And if you've got negative friends, just get new friends, basically. You just don't need it. So create good habits and turn bad habits into good ones if you can as well. It's entirely possible.
Excellent. And if you could thank just one person, either dead or alive, Alan, for having a positive influence on yourself and your career, who would that be and why?
I would say probably, I've got a couple actually for completely different reasons. My dad, for instilling a work ethic in me, and also just because he worked ridiculously hard all his life. He's 78 last week actually, so luckily he's sort of still with us. And also teaching me how not to do business, because Dad, I love him to bits, but was a bloody awful businessman. So I learned a lot from Dad about how to do things and not do things, but I think the work ethic I definitely get from my dad, and just actually both my parents, to be honest. So I thank my dad for that. And I think from a random inspirational piece, I never forget seeing Richard Branson do that transatlantic crossing in 1988. I think I was 12.
Oh, yeah.
And he inspired me to, again, how you can have fun with business. And I think he taught me what an entrepreneur, was or is. So I think Richard as well, for being a big influence there. And again, just being a generally bloody nice person. So you should teach everyone really that, you don't have to be, despite all the bad press recently with him, which isn't true.
Sure.
Then you can do the right thing in business. You don't have to be a hard-nosed businessman to be successful.
Excellent. Well, everyone, you've been tuning into Sam's Business Growth Show, where we sit down with business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from around the globe. We find out their story, how digital marketing's helped them along the way, and their exclusive tips and insights to skyrocket your business. Alan, before we wrap things up, give us a quick snapshot of your business, how people can get in touch with your good self, and where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. So grenade.com is the website. I'm on Instagram, Grenade CEO. And LinkedIn's probably the best profile for me. So yeah, not difficult to find on LinkedIn, having one of my famous daily rants. But yeah, LinkedIn's a good shout. I can't get into personal correspondence, unfortunately, because I do get about 600 messages a day. I do read them, but I just can't reply to them. I'd reply to the odd few, but depending on what else is going on. But otherwise, I'd get buried and stuff. So unfortunately, can't do that. But I do read them, so you can find me on there.
Awesome. The show is sponsored by webchoiceuk.com, helping businesses skyrocket their leads, sales, and brand positioning via results-driven digital marketing, SEO, conversion-focused web design, and mobile apps. That's webchoiceuk.com. Alan, really appreciate your time, man. We've learnt a lot from you. Thanks very much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Sam. Nice to meet you.
Subscribe today for more digital marketing, sales, and business growth tips from the experts.